College is supposed to be about new beginnings, friends, and memories. But behind the closed doors of dorm rooms, many students have faced terrifying experiences they'll never forget. Here are 3 disturbing, true dorm room scary stories from college. Story 1. The Knock at 3 a.m. Chapter 1. The beginning. I was a sophomore at a small college in the Midwest. My dorm room was on the 3rd floor, and it was one of those older buildings where the hallways always felt colder than they should. It was around 3 in the morning when I woke up to a faint knocking sound. At first, I thought I had dreamt it. But then I heard it again, 3 slow knocks on my door. I was a sophomore at a small college in the Midwest. My dorm was nothing special, just an old brick building with thin walls and long, echoing hallways. My room was on the 3rd floor, tucked away near the end of the corridor. It was the kind of place where the air always felt heavy, like the building had a memory of everything that happened inside it. Nights there were often quiet, sometimes too quiet, where even the smallest sound felt amplified. That particular night, I had gone to bed late after studying. My roommate had gone home for the weekend, so the room was mine alone. I remember falling asleep with my desk lamp still glowing faintly. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound that was so soft at first, I thought it was part of a dream. It was a faint knocking, slow, deliberate, almost gentle. I sat up, blinking in the dim light. The room felt colder than usual. For a moment, I stayed completely still, straining my ears to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Then, after a few seconds of silence, I heard it again. 3 knocks, slow and evenly spaced, like someone trying to get my attention without waking the whole floor. My chest tightened as I stared toward the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and at that hour, nobody had any business knocking. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, my mind racing with explanations. Maybe it was someone who got the wrong room. Maybe it was just a prank, or maybe it was something else. Would you open your door at 3 a.m. if you heard knocking? Or would you stay perfectly still like I did, hoping it would just stop? I whispered a shaky hello, but my voice barely carried. There was no reply, just silence pressing against the walls of my dorm room. I waited, my ears ringing with the kind of quiet that only comes in the dead of night. My breathing felt loud, my heartbeat even louder. Seconds dragged into minutes. I started convincing myself that I had really been dreaming. My eyes grew heavy again as I leaned back against the pillow. But before I could close them, there it was, another knock, the same slow, steady rhythm. 3 times. This time, I knew it wasn't my imagination. I froze, my eyes locked on the door handle. I felt like if it turned, I wouldn't even be able to move. The entire room felt colder, like someone had just opened a window. The silence that followed seemed heavier than before, pressing against me. Who was out there? And why did they only knock but never say a word? I thought about calling campus security, but my phone was across the room on the desk. To reach it, I'd have to leave the safety of my bed and cross closer to the door. The thought of standing just feet away from whatever was on the other side made my skin crawl. Instead, I stayed perfectly still. My eyes flicked between the door and the faint, shadowy corners of my dorm. I could hear the faint hum of the heater in the hall, but inside the room, the silence was absolute. Every creak in the building now sounded like a footstep. Every gust of air in the vent felt like a whisper. A part of me wanted to scream out and scare away whoever it was. But another part of me thought that staying quiet was the safest option. If I ignored it, maybe it would stop. Maybe whoever was knocking would go away. But what if they didn't go away? What if they were standing out there, waiting, listening? After what felt like an eternity, I finally gathered the courage to slide out of bed. I moved as quietly as possible, each step across the cold floorboards echoing in my ears. When I reached the door, I hesitated, then leaned forward to look through the small peephole. My hand was shaking as I steadied myself against the wood, and what I saw through that peephole made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The hallway outside was completely empty. No footsteps, no shadows, no movement. Just the dim yellow light of the overhead bulbs stretching down the corridor. I stepped back, my throat dry. Had I imagined it all along? Had I woken up from a dream and carried it into reality? I stared at the door like it was lying to me, like something was hiding just out of view. Was someone standing against the wall, waiting for me to open it? Or had the knocking really come from nowhere at all? The silence dragged on again, and slowly I convinced myself to crawl back into bed. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and kept my eyes locked on the door, too scared to close them. My heart was still racing, but eventually exhaustion began to drag me down. And then, just as I started to drift off, it came again. 3 slow knocks. But this time, it didn't sound like it was coming from the door. It sounded like it was coming from inside the room, inside my closet. Chapter 2. The build-up. I sat up in bed, frozen. No one ever visited at that hour. My roommate was gone for the weekend, so it was just me. I called out softly, "Who is it?" No answer, just silence. Then, after a few seconds, another 3 knocks, slower this time. My chest tightened. I grabbed my phone, ready to call campus security. So when I looked through the small peephole, no one was there. Just an empty hallway. I sat up in bed, my body stiff, as if I had just been pulled from a nightmare. The air in my room felt heavier than before, like the temperature had dropped in seconds. My eyes locked on the door, and I waited. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Not a single sound from the hallway. My roommate was gone for the weekend. That fact echoed in my head, making the situation worse. There was no one else who could have answered the knock if I ignored it. No one else who would open the door to check. It was just me, alone in that dimly lit room, with the sound still ringing in my ears. I forced myself to call out, my voice breaking in the silence. "Who is it?" I said, barely above a whisper. My words were swallowed instantly by the thick, still air. No response came back, only quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like something is listening, even if you can't see it. Why wouldn't they answer? Why knock if you won't say a word? Seconds passed, but they felt stretched and twisted, like time itself didn't want to move. Just as my muscles started to loosen, I heard it again. 3 knocks, slower this time. Each thud of knuckle-on would carry through the room, sinking into my chest like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. My breathing quickened. I could hear every inhale, every exhale, as if the silence wanted to amplify my fear. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't control, like my own body was trying to warn me of something I couldn't see. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed deeper now. Should I open the door, or should I pretend I wasn't here at all? My hand reached for my phone on the desk beside me. Screen lit up the room with a cold glow as I clutched it, debating whether to call campus security. But the thought of telling someone that I was scared of knocks in the middle of the night sounded almost childish still. The dread inside me wouldn't go away. I slowly slid off the bed, my feet touching the cold floor. Every creak of the wood felt deafening in the silence. My heart hammered harder with each step as I crossed to the door. The metal handle gleamed faintly under the light, like it was waiting for me to make a choice. What would I see if I opened that door? Instead of opening it, I leaned forward to look through the peephole. My breath fogged the cold surface as I pressed my eye to the glass. I squinted into the distorted view of the hallway outside, my pulse pounding in my ears. There was nothing. The hallway was empty. My stomach dropped as I scanned left and right. The dim yellow bulbs hummed overhead, stretching light down the narrow hall. Not a single shadow moved. Not a single figure stood waiting. Just emptiness. Had I imagined it? Was my mind playing tricks on me after waking up suddenly? I pulled away from the peephole, but I didn't feel relieved. My body didn't believe what my eyes had just seen. The silence wasn't comforting. It was heavier now, pressing in, suffocating me. My chest tightened further, my fingers trembling as I lowered the phone from my hand. I turned back toward my bed, but the sound came again, this time softer. 3 knocks, each one slower than the last, as if whoever or whatever was there was growing impatient. My legs froze mid-step. The sound hadn't come from the door this time. It was different, closer, like it had shifted position in the room. No one was outside. Where was the knocking coming from? I turned my head slowly, my eyes moving toward the closet door. The air in the room seemed to shift with me, colder in that corner, heavier somehow. The closet door stood shut, its edges shadowed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was behind it. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, loud enough I thought it might give me away. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound, my phone shaking in my grip. The silence in the room grew unbearable, stretched thin like it was about to break. Would you have opened that closet? Or would you run before finding out what was waiting inside? I kept staring at it, the dark line of its frame cutting through the room. Every instinct told me to leave, to walk out into the hallway and never come back. But my body wouldn't move. It was as if the closet itself held me in place, pulling me in with invisible hands. Cut. The sound of wood creaking reached my ears, faint but undeniable. My closet door shifted, just slightly, enough for me to see a thin sliver of blackness between the frame and the door. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't my imagination. Something was inside, okay? The silence that followed was worse than the knocking. Trying to convince myself it was just someone messing around, I locked the deadbolt and got back into bed. But minutes later, I heard the knocking again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from inside the closet. My closet door slowly creaked open as I stared in shock. When I finally forced myself to get up and check, the closet was empty. The next morning, I found faint scratch marks on the inside of the closet door. I never slept in that dorm room alone again. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it had to be some kind of prank. Maybe someone was just messing with me, trying to scare the kid stuck alone in his dorm. I thought barely helped. My hands were still shaking as I double-checked the deadbolt and slid back under the covers. The bed felt colder than it had before. I pulled the blanket tight around me, trying to focus on my breathing. My heart thudded with each beat, refusing to settle. I told myself it was over now. Whoever had been knocking was gone. The hallway was empty. There was nothing left to worry about. Minutes passed in silence. The building creaked softly, the kind of natural noises you learn to ignore after living in an old dorm. I began to drift off, my eyelids growing heavy. That's when I heard it again. The same sound, the same rhythm. 3 knocks, but this time it wasn't at the door. Would you rather it be outside your door or from somewhere inside your room? The sound came from the closet. The same 3 knocks, muffled by the thin wooden door. My entire body froze. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stared at that dark rectangle across the room. I could see the faint outline of the door in the dim glow from my desk lamp. I told myself it wasn't real. That maybe pipes were knocking. Maybe the heater had made the sound. I clung to any excuse I could find, but none of them made sense. It had been 2 deliberate, 3 slow, spaced-out knocks. Like someone wanted me to know they were there, who was knocking from inside my closet. The silence after was unbearable. It pressed against my ears, louder than the knocking itself. Then, slowly, with a creak that felt too real to ignore, the closet door began to move. Just an inch at first, then a little more, until a thin black gap appeared between the frame and the door. My heart pounded so hard, it felt like the sound filled the room. I couldn't look away from the door. My throat was dry, my breathing ragged. Every second that passed, the gap widened. It wasn't swinging open fast. It was creeping, slow and steady, as if someone was inside, pushing it, little by little. Should I run out the door? Or would turning my back mean letting whatever it was out of the closet? The air in the room felt wrong, colder near the closet. My skin prickled with goosebumps. The shadows stretched in ways they shouldn't have. I gripped my phone so tight my knuckles hurt, but I couldn't bring myself to unlock it. Couldn't look away from that door. The creaking finally stopped. A closet door hung open just a few inches, enough to show the pitch-black interior beyond. Nothing moved. No sound. Just a slice of darkness staring back at me like an eye. I told myself I had to check. If I didn't, I'd never sleep again. Slowly, I forced my legs over the side of the bed. My feet touched the cold floor. Each step toward the closet felt like walking into a nightmare. My breathing echoed inside my own head, too loud, too shaky. Would you have had the courage to get closer? Or would you have left the room without looking back? Stopped a few feet from the door. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. The air near the opening felt colder, like a draft was leaking from the darkness itself. I tightened my jaw, braced myself, and yanked the door wide open. The closet was empty. My eyes darted around inside, desperate for movement. I saw nothing but clothes hanging, shoes on the floor, and boxes stacked against the wall. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For a moment, relief washed over me. But the relief didn't last. Something felt wrong. Stepped closer, crouched down, and ran my hand along the inside of the door. That's when I noticed them. Faint, but clear. Scratch marks. Long, thin lines etched into the wood. Not just one or two, but dozens. If the closet was empty, who left those marks? I stumbled back, slamming the closet door shut again. I pressed my back against the wall, staring at it like I expected it to burst open. My chest was heaving now, could barely think straight. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating, but the closet felt alive, like it was holding its breath, waiting. I barely slept the rest of the night. Every creak of the building made me flinch. Every shadow made me think the closet door was moving again. When the sunlight finally crept through the blinds, I felt like I had survived something. The next morning, I checked again in the daylight. The scratches were still there. Clearer now in the sun. Long, jagged grooves, torn into the wood, as if someone had been trapped inside and had clawed to get out. Was someone, or something, living inside my closet? I never slept alone in that dorm room again. Even with my roommate back, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. Sound of those knocks, the creak of that door, scratches that proved it wasn't just in my head. To this day, I still wonder, what would have happened if I had opened that closet sooner? Or worse, what would have happened if I hadn't opened it at all? Story 2. The roommate who wasn't there during my freshman year. I lived in a 2-person dorm. My roommate, Kyle, was a quiet guy, barely spoke, and kept to himself. One night, I came back late from studying. The room was dark, but I could see the shape of Kyle lying in his bed. I whispered, "Sorry for waking you." He didn't respond. During my freshman year, I lived in a 2-person dorm. My roommate's name was Kyle. He wasn't unfriendly, but he wasn't exactly social either. He kept to himself, always had headphones in, and usually spent the night at his girlfriend's place across campus. We spoke when we needed to, but that was about it. One night, I stayed late in the library, finishing a paper. By the time I got back to the dorm, the hallway was almost empty. The lights above buzzed faintly, giving everything a dull yellow glow. I unlocked the door quietly, not wanting to wake Kyle if he was in bed. The room was dark when I stepped inside. Only the faint glow of the streetlight outside filtered through the blinds. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out the shape of Kyle lying in his bed across the room. He was facing the wall, his blanket pulled up high. I whispered softly, "Sorry for waking you." My voice sounded louder in the silence than I expected. Kyle didn't answer, didn't move either. Just the sound of steady, raspy breathing filled the room. Wouldn't you expect at least some kind of response if you spoke to your roommate? I set my bag down on the chair and began changing quietly. Every move I made felt exaggerated, like I was disturbing the air itself. But Kyle didn't stir. He just kept breathing, slow and uneven. At first, I thought he was asleep, but something about the sound didn't sit right. It wasn't the kind of soft, steady breathing you'd expect from someone who's out cold. It was rougher, almost like a whisper in rhythm. Long inhale, long exhale, then a pause that made me think he was awake, listening. Why would he just lie there silently if he knew I was in the room? I climbed into my own bed, careful not to make a sound. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, but I couldn't relax. That breathing kept filling the room, steady but strange. I tried to convince myself it was normal, that I was overthinking. But then I heard something else, a whisper. It was so faint, I thought I imagined it. Just a few soft syllables, like words half-spoken into the dark. I sat up a little, squinting across the room. "Kyle," I whispered. No reply. The breathing continued, uneven and slow. What do you do when your roommate whispers in the dark but refuses to answer? I listened harder, straining my ears. Minutes passed before I heard it again. The same faint murmur, few broken words that I couldn't understand. My skin prickled, my heart rate picked up. I was wide awake now, watching that dark shape under the blankets. Part of me wanted to get up and ask him directly if he was okay, but something deep inside told me not to. It told me to stay in bed, to keep watching, so I did. My eyes stayed locked on his still body. The longer I stared, the stranger it became. His chest didn't move with his breaths the way it should have. Okay, the blanket shifted just slightly, but it didn't look natural. The sound of breathing seemed too loud, too heavy, like it wasn't even coming from him. Was he even asleep at all, or was someone else lying in that bed? I pulled the blanket over myself and laid back, pretending to sleep. My body was stiff with fear. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, my chest rising and falling too fast. But I kept my breathing slow, vague, trying to convince whatever was across the room that I wasn't awake. The room felt colder now. The air was heavy, pressing against my chest. I tried to shut my eyes, but every nerve in my body screamed at me to keep them open. My ears focused on every sound, every shift of the mattress, every scrape in the silence. And then I felt it. The breathing had stopped. As I changed and got into bed, I noticed Kyle's breathing was strange. It sounded raspy, uneven. After a while, I heard him whisper something. It was too quiet to understand. I asked, "Did you say something?" No reply, just that same uneven breathing. I turned over and forced myself to sleep. I sat down on the edge of my bed, trying to move quietly. The room was filled with that raspy sound. It didn't sound normal. Kyle's breaths weren't steady, came out uneven, like someone trying to catch their breath after running. But he hadn't been running. He had been lying there the whole time. I pulled my blanket up and leaned back against my pillow. The air in the room felt heavy. Each breath he took seemed louder than the last. At first, I told myself he might just have a cold. Or maybe he was half asleep. But the longer I listened, the stranger it sounded. Have you ever heard breathing that just didn't sound human? It wasn't just the rasp. It was the rhythm. It's too slow at times, then suddenly fast, like he was gasping. My skin prickled as I realized it wasn't normal sleep breathing. I shifted on my bed, hoping he would notice and say something, but he didn't. The room was so dark I could barely see his outline. His body was turned toward the wall, blankets pulled up high, hiding his face. The sound seemed to come from deep inside the sheets. I stared, waiting for him to move, to roll over, to do anything. but he stayed perfectly still. Why would someone breathe like that while lying motionless? A few minutes passed. Then I heard something else, a whisper. It was faint, so faint that at first I thought my mind was playing tricks. It lasted only a second, just a small string of words, but too quiet to understand. My chest tightened. I froze. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Did you say something?" My voice cracked a little in the silence, but there was no reply. No shift of the mattress. No sound except for that horrible, uneven breathing. What would you do if your roommate whispered something and then went completely silent? The quiet stretched on. I listened harder, straining my ears. Then it happened again. That same faint murmur. It wasn't in my head. I was sure of it. Words, broken and hushed, coming from the dark shape lying just a few feet away from me. My body tensed. I sat up slightly, squinting through the dark. "Kyle," I tried again. My voice was soft, but the silence that followed felt crushing. The breathing never stopped. The whispering never returned. It was as if he wanted me to know he was awake, but not answer me. Was he ignoring me? Or was it something else entirely? I lay back down, pulling the blanket up to my chin. I turned to face the wall, forcing my eyes shut. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel each beat in my temples. The breathing was behind me now, filling the silence with its uneven rhythm. Minutes dragged by. I tried to focus on anything else. The hum of the heater, the faint buzz of the lights outside the window. But no matter how hard I tried, that breathing was all I could hear. Every inhale and exhale made my skin crawl. How do you fall asleep when you're not sure who or what is breathing behind you? I told myself not to overthink. Kyle was probably just talking in his sleep. That was it. Maybe he mumbled without realizing it. I wanted to believe that. So I forced myself to roll onto my side, pulling the blanket tighter. My eyelids grew heavy, but my body stayed tense. The last thing I remember hearing before slipping into an uneasy sleep was a final, faint whisper. Clearer this time. A single word, but it wasn't my name. It was laughter. The next morning, I woke up and saw Kyle's bed neatly made. Confused, I asked him later why he left in the middle of the night. His face went pale. He told me he had been staying at his girlfriend's dorm all week. That meant whoever I saw in that bed wasn't Kyle. To this day, I can't know who or what was lying just a few feet away from me. I woke up the next morning feeling drained. My body ached like I hadn't truly rested. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The room was empty of that raspy breathing that had haunted me all night. It was almost too quiet, like the air itself was holding still. I rubbed my eyes and turned my head. That's when I saw it. Kyle's bed. It was perfectly made. The sheets tucked in, the blanket folded just right. It didn't look like someone had just gotten up. It looked like no one had slept there at all. Have you ever seen something so ordinary? It instantly felt something was wrong. For a second, my mind froze. My thoughts raced to last night. The uneven breaths, the faint whispers, the presence lying just a few feet from me. I had seen the outline. I had heard the sounds. My body remembered the fear. So, why did the bed look untouched? I got up slowly, my legs weak beneath me. I walked over to Kyle's side of the room. The blanket looked smooth, the pillow uncreased. I pressed my hand down onto the mattress, cold, no warmth at all. It's like no one had been there for hours. How could someone breathe, whisper, and shift in a bed without leaving the slightest trace? Later that afternoon, I finally saw Kyle in the hallway. He was talking to a couple of people, laughing about something. I felt uneasy just looking at him, but I needed to know. I walked up, trying to sound casual. "Hey, why'd you leave last night?" At first, he looked confused. Smile faded. His eyes shifted, like he was replaying my words in his head. "Leave?" he asked. "What do you mean?" What do you say when your roommate doesn't even know he was supposed to be there? I explained carefully. I told him I had heard him in bed, that I thought he was asleep the whole night. But when I woke up, he was gone. The bed was made. His face went pale. His lips tightened, and he just stared at me for a moment before answering. I wasn't here, he said quietly. I've been staying in my girlfriend's dorm all week. My stomach dropped. My mouth went dry. The hallway suddenly felt too loud, voices echoing in a way that made me dizzy. No, I whispered, shaking my head. You were there. I heard you breathing. I heard you whisper. But his expression never changed. His voice stayed flat. I wasn't here. If Kyle hadn't been in the bed beside me, then who was? That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the neatly made sheets across the room. The silence pressed down on me. I replayed everything in my mind, again and again. The raspy sound of air dragging through a throat. The faint words slipping from unseen lips. The way the outline in the dark never moved. Was it a person? Some stranger who slipped in unnoticed? Something worse. Something that wanted me to believe it was Kyle. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadowy figure lying in that bed. Every time I started to drift, I thought I heard breathing again. I would snap my eyes open, heart pounding, but the room would be empty. Do you know that sick feeling when you realize the safest place in your life might not be safe at all? I started checking the locks every night, door, window, even the closet. I made sure everything was shut tight before climbing into bed. Still, sleep didn't come easy. The memory of that night clung to me. I could almost feel that presence behind me when I turned off the lights. A week passed. Kyle stayed at his girlfriend's, barely coming back to grab things. I was alone most of the time, and honestly, I didn't mind. The room felt wrong when he was gone, but it felt worse when I thought about him being there. Or rather, when I thought about something pretending to be him being there. Then, one night, I woke to a sound. Not breathing, not whispering, something softer. The sound of sheets shifting. My eyes shot open. My whole body went cold. What would you do if you heard someone settling into bed? When you knew the bed should be empty, I turned my head slowly. The dark outline was there again, a shape beneath the blanket, head resting on the pillow, facing the wall. The bed that had been untouched all week was now full. My throat tightened. My hands trembled. Couldn't breathe too loud. I couldn't move. The fear was like ice in my veins. It was back. Whatever it was, it had come back. And then, just like before, the breathing started. Uneven, raspy, inhale, exhale, over and over. How could something so simple sound so wrong? I wanted to scream, to run. But I couldn't. I lay there, trapped, my eyes fixed on the shadow across the room. Every inhale it took felt heavier, louder, like it was pulling in the air we both needed to breathe. Hours seemed to pass. My eyes burned from staying open too long. I kept waiting for it to move, to sit up, to face me. But it never did. It's lying there, breathing. Why did it come back if Kyle wasn't here? The next morning, once again, the bed was empty, neatly made, cold to the touch. No sign anyone had ever been there. I broke down then. I couldn't take it anymore. To this day, I still don't know what was lying just a few feet from me on those nights, but I do know one thing. It was not Kyle. Story 3. The girl in the bathroom. This happened to a friend of mine who lived in the girls' dorm. The bathrooms were at the end of the hall, and everyone had to share them. So late one night, she woke up needing to use the bathroom. As she walked down the hall, she noticed the bathroom light was flickering. This happened to a friend of mine. She lived in the girls' dorm during her first year of college. She wasn't someone who made up stories for attention. In fact, she hated scary things. But what she told me about that night still makes my skin crawl. The dorm itself was old. Long hallways with buzzing lights. Doors that creaked every time someone opened them. Even in the day, it carried this stale smell, like damp carpets and dust. At night, though, it was different. The silence in that building felt alive. Have you ever walked through a hallway at night and felt like the walls themselves were listening? Everyone on her floor shared the same bathrooms. They were at the very end of the hall. Single room with showers, sinks, and a row of stalls. Nobody liked going there after midnight. But if you needed to, you had no choice. That night, she woke up needing to use the bathroom. She checked her phone. 2:13 a.m. Her roommate was sound asleep, the faint sound of her steady breathing filling the room. She slipped on her slippers and quietly opened the door. The hallway outside was empty, silent, the kind of silence where even the smallest sound seems too loud. She could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights, some flickering as she walked. Her shadow stretched across the carpet in the dim glow. Would you be able to walk to the very end of a hallway if you knew no one else was awake? As she walked further, she noticed the bathroom light ahead. It wasn't steady, flickered on and off, buzzing faintly each time. For a second, it stayed dark, then flashed bright, then dim again. It looked weak, like it was about to die out completely. She slowed her pace. Something about that flickering unsettled her. The bathroom doorway glowed faintly with each pulse of the bulb. The shadows inside seemed to shift unnaturally with every flash. It made her chest tighten. Why does something as simple as a broken light feel so threatening when you're alone? She considered turning back. Maybe she could hold it until morning. But she shook her head. She told herself she was being ridiculous. She had walked into that bathroom dozens of times before. This was no different. Still, her body felt tense as she reached the door. She pushed it open slowly, the hinges letting out a low groan. The sound echoed off the tiled walls inside. The bathroom smelled faintly of bleach mixed with something damp, something sour. Have you ever stepped into a room and felt the air change instantly? The cold hit her as soon as she walked in. The hallway had been warm, but the bathroom air felt different, stale, heavy. She rubbed her arms and glanced around. The stalls lined up on one side, the cracked mirrors above the sinks on the other. The flickering light bulb was directly above the sinks. Buzz of electricity seemed louder now. Shadows stretched and shifted across the tiles with every dim and bright pulse. For just a second, she thought she saw something move in the far stall. Was it a shadow? Something standing there in the dark? She hesitated by the door. The room felt too big, too empty. The sound of a faucet dripping echoed through the silence, each drop ringing louder than it should. She considered leaving, but her body betrayed her she really couldn't wait much longer. She walked carefully toward the stalls. Slippered step squeaked faintly against the damp tile. She avoided looking into the mirrors. Something about catching her own reflection in that flickering light felt unbearable. Would you look into the mirror, or would you keep your eyes down? She chose a stall in the middle, one that didn't feel too close to the door, but not at the far end either. She stepped inside, pulled the door shut, and slid the lock. The tiny click echoed, sharper than she expected. For a moment, she felt safer. It was just her, four walls, a locked door. Then the light flickered again. Darkness filled the bathroom for a long, uncomfortable second. When it flashed back on, she swore she heard something. It wasn't the faucet. It wasn't the buzzing bulb. It was softer, closer. It sounded like footsteps. Her breath hitched. She froze, straining to listen. The light flickered again. She bent forward slightly, peering through the gap of her stall door. The floor beneath the other stalls was empty. No shadows. Feet. Was she imagining it? Or was someone else in there with her? She sat still, her ears straining against the silence. Then, just as the light dimmed again, she heard it once more, a soft scrape against the floor tiles. Slow, deliberate, like bare feet dragging ever so slightly as they moved. The light came back on, empty. Nothing under the stalls, just shiny, damp tiles. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She gripped the edges of the toilet seat, her knuckles whitening. Every flicker of the light felt longer now. Every shadow darker. She tried to steady her breathing, but it only made her aware of how loud it sounded. What's worse, being alone or realizing you might not be? Then she heard it again. This time, not footsteps. Breathing, soft at first. Then, deeper, heavier, coming from the row of stalls. Her whole body went still. The breathing didn't match hers. It was too slow, too heavy. She leaned forward again, eyes glued to the thin line of light beneath the door. And that's when she saw them. Feet, pale, bare, standing just outside the farthest stall, motionless, facing her direction. Would you scream? Or would you stay silent and pray they didn't know you were there? Her hand covered her mouth as she hailed in a cry. Her body trembled as she waited. The feet didn't move. They just stood there, toes pointed straight at her. Then the light flickered out. Darkness. When it came back on, the feet were gone. She sat there, frozen in silence. The bathroom was empty again. No sounds, no movement, only the slow drip of the faucet. Her heart hammered in her chest. She whispered to herself, "I'm imagining it." But deep down, she knew she wasn't. And that was only the beginning. When she pushed the door open, she saw a girl standing at the sink. Her long, dark hair covered most of her face. She thought it was another student, so she mumbled a quick hi and went into a stall. As she sat there, she realized she never heard the girl leave or even move. Just silence. She felt uneasy, so she peeked under the stall door. When she pushed the door open, the bathroom light flickered overhead. A sharp buzzing echoed from the bulb, filling the cold room. That was when she saw her, a girl standing at the sink. Her hair was long and dark. It draped down in tangled strands, covering most of her face. She stood completely still, her head tilted slightly downward. At first, my friend thought nothing of it. She assumed it was just another student from the dorm. Someone else up late, brushing her teeth or washing her face. She forced a quick smile and muttered a quiet hi. The girl didn't respond. She didn't even shift her weight or turn her head. She just stood there, unmoving, as though she hadn't heard anything at all. Would you feel uneasy if someone ignored you like that? Or would you brush it off as nothing? My friend didn't think much of it. She felt awkward, sure, but she shrugged it off. She walked past the sinks and pushed herself into one of the stalls. The metal door squeaked loudly as she shut it, the lock clicking in place. She sat down, expecting to hear movement. The sound of running water, footsteps, maybe the rustle of clothes. But the bathroom stayed silent. The silence was thick, unnatural, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Have you ever noticed how silence can be so much louder than noise? She waited. She expected the sound of the sink turning on, or the footsteps leaving. But nothing came. She shifted slightly, straining her ears. The girl hadn't left. My friend was sure of it. She hadn't heard the door creak open. She hadn't heard a single movement since she entered. Her heart began to beat harder in her chest. She pressed her lips together, listening for the smallest sound. Anything. Why wasn't she moving? The bathroom light flickered again. The buzzing grew louder for just a second, then quieted. Shadows shifted across the tiles, crawling over the stall door. My friend leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on the small gap at the bottom of the stall. She expected to see feet moving past, but there was nothing. Just the pale reflection of the flickering light against the floor. She swallowed hard. Something about this felt wrong. Would you check? Or would you stay silent and wait? Against her better judgment, she leaned down, slowly, carefully. Her eyes moved toward the gap under the stall. Her breath caught in her throat. The girl was still there. She could see her feet, bare, pale, motionless against the cold tile. They hadn't shifted an inch since she entered. They were planted directly in front of the sink. My friend's body went rigid. Her skin prickled with goosebumps. She stayed crouched for several seconds, staring, waiting for the feet to move. But they didn't. How long can someone stand that still without making a sound? She pulled back quickly, pressing her back against the stall wall. She tried to calm her breathing, but each inhale sounded too loud in the suffocating silence. The bathroom smelled faintly of mildew now, stronger than before. She wondered if it had been there the whole time, or if it was only just creeping in. Her hands trembled slightly. She pressed her palms to her knees, forcing herself to stay quiet. Should she leave now, or would opening the stall door draw attention? Then the dripping started. She hadn't noticed it before. A slow, rhythmic drip from the sink. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the empty room. But the girl's feet didn't move. Drip, drip. The light flickered again. For a moment, the entire room went dark. And in that darkness, she swore she heard something else. Breathing, soft, slow, but it wasn't hers. Her chest tightened. She held her breath, straining to listen. And there it was again. The steady inhale and exhale of someone standing just outside the stall. Would you dare to look again? Or would you keep your eyes shut and hope it went away? She couldn't help herself. Her curiosity mixed with fear. She bent forward again, eyes glued to the bottom of the stall door. The feet were gone. Her stomach dropped. She covered her mouth to stop a gasp from escaping. The bathroom was silent once more, except for that steady drip from the sink. But if the feet weren't there anymore, where was she? My friend pressed her ear against the stall door, trying to catch even the faintest sound. At first, she heard nothing. Then, a soft scrape against the tile. It was close. Too close. Her eyes darted around the tiny stall. She felt trapped, the walls pressing in around her. Her breathing came faster now, each exhale fogging the air in front of her. What would you do if you realized you weren't alone, but you couldn't see who was with you? The scraping stopped. Silence. Then, so faint she almost missed it, came a whisper. Low, hollow, just outside the stall. She couldn't make out the words. They were too soft, but the voice was there. Her heart slammed in her chest. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying the light would stop flickering, praying that when she opened them again, the bathroom would be empty. But the whisper came again, louder this time, and this time it sounded like her name. There were no shoes, no feet, nothing. But when she looked back up, the bathroom mirror was fogged, even though the air was cold. Written in the fog were the words, "Get out." She ran back to her dorm, screaming. The next day, she learned that years before, a girl had died in that bathroom after an accident. My friend never used that bathroom again. There were no shoes, no feet, nothing beneath the stall when she looked. For a brief moment, she thought maybe she had just imagined it all. Maybe her nerves were tricking her. But when she lifted her head again, her stomach dropped. The bathroom mirror was fogged over. The glass was covered in a white mist, as if someone had just exhaled against it. How could that be? The air in the bathroom was freezing. Her breath showed in faint white clouds, not heavy enough to coat the mirror like that. She leaned forward slightly, squinting through the narrow stall crack. Okay, that's when she saw it. Words. 2 words carved into the fog like invisible fingers had written them across the glass. Get out. Would your blood run cold if you saw that? Or would you tell yourself it was some kind of prank? Her hands trembled as she covered her mouth. The message was clear. It wasn't some accident, some random condensation. Someone or something wanted her gone. The bathroom was silent, except for her quick, shallow breaths. Even the dripping she had heard earlier had stopped. The air felt heavier, thicker, pressing down on her chest. Should she listen to the warning, or was leaving exactly what it wanted? She shoved the stall door open. It swung so violently that it banged against the wall with a deafening metallic slam. The sound echoed in the empty room, bouncing off the tiles until it faded into silence again. Her eyes darted around. The sink was empty. The floor was empty. No one was there. Tit fogged over a mirror with its message staring back at her. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she stepped forward. Each footstep squeaked against the damp floor, and with each step, the words grew clearer. Would you walk closer to a mirror like that? Or would you have bolted for the door already? She forced herself to move. Her breath shook as she neared the sink. She reached out slowly, almost against her will, her fingertips hovering just inches from the foggy glass. The second her finger grazed the mirror, the light above her flickered violently. The buzzing grew louder, crackling as though the bulb might explode at any second. And for a split second, just before the light steadied, she swore she saw another face in the glass. Not hers. The reflection had long, tangled hair and pale skin, a cast, dark eyes that stared back at her from behind the fog. Her heart stopped. She stumbled backward, hitting the stall door. The mirror cleared instantly. Only her own reflection remained. Had she imagined it, or was something staring back from the other side? She didn't wait to find out. She spun on her heel and sprinted for the door. Her hand grabbed the handle, twisting desperately. At first, it wouldn't move. She pulled harder, panic rising in her throat. Finally, it clicked and swung open. She burst into the hallway, gasping for air like she'd been underwater. The corridor lights flickered just like the bathroom light had. The silence followed her out, clinging to her like a shadow. Why does it always feel like something is right behind you when you're running away? She didn't stop. Her footsteps pounded against the floor as she raced down the hall. She reached her dorm room, slammed the door, and locked it. Her roommate sat up in bed, startled. "What happened?" she asked, but my friend couldn't explain. She just stood there, shaking, staring at the door as if something might follow her inside. That night, she didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fogged mirror. She saw those words written across it. She saw the pale face staring back. Would you have been able to fall asleep after that? The next day, she told someone what happened. A girl on her floor. The girl's face went pale instantly, like she already knew. And that's when she heard the story. Years earlier, another student had died in that bathroom. They said it was an accident, that she slipped, hit her head on the sink, and never woke up. But others whispered it wasn't an accident, that someone else had been in there with her, that she had been pushed. The more details my friend heard, the colder she felt. The fog on the mirror, the whispers she thought she heard, the reflection. Wouldn't you wonder if the girl who died was the same one she had seen staring back at her? From that day on, she avoided the bathroom completely. Even walking past it made her uneasy. She said sometimes she could hear faint dripping sounds from inside when she passed by. And sometimes, just sometimes, she thought she heard faint breathing behind the door. But the worst part was the nights. Lying awake in her dorm bed, she would stare at the dark window, and more than once she swore she saw the faintest outline of words forming against the glass. "Get out! These were 3 disturbing, true dorm room scary stories from college. Psh, which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.